This is Euronews now. Here are your top stories. Russian forces seize the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, which is set ablaze during the fight. Ukraine says the fire is now extinguished. Ukrainian cities desperately hold on under bombardment to the north, east and south, but Mariupol and Kyiv warn they are now encircled.
With more death, more suffering and more destruction.
The NATO chief warns that the days ahead will only get more difficult as he holds talks with the US Secretary of State and EU foreign ministers meet in Brussels. And thousands more Ukrainians take to the road, if they can, in a desperate bid to get out. Neighbouring countries ramp up their efforts to help as millions more are expected. I'm Helena Humphrey. Good to have you with us. There has been international condemnation of Russia's attack on Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant as its invading forces push forward and capture further territory. Well, the power plant is the biggest of its kind in Europe. It came under Russian rocket fire on Friday morning. A blaze broke out in the facility, but the head of the UN Atomic Agency confirmed no radioactive material has been released. Now, the plant is under Russian control now, and Ukraine's President Zelensky called the attack terror on an unprecedented level. But Russia says that the fire was staged by Ukrainian saboteurs. There were reports of fierce fighting around the power plant during the night. The facility and the neighbouring town of Energodar have been surrounded since the beginning of the week. Ukrainian officials say up to 3 army personnel were killed and 2 wounded in the Russian attack. The plant is situated in southeastern Ukraine, and the facility is a strategically important gain for Russian forces trying to take further control of the country. But elsewhere, the invading army is making slower progress. Kherson remains the only major city under Russian control. Heavy shelling continues in Kharkiv and in the capital, Kyiv. The death toll from Thursday's Russian rocket attack in the residential district of Chernihiv has risen to 47. Well, the battle for Kyiv remains in the capital's suburbs and surrounding towns, and Ukraine Defense Forces say that they are inflicting heavy damage on the Russian army. In the south, the city of Mariupol is under siege. The city's mayor says they have no water, heat or electricity and that they're running out of food. But Ukraine's President Zelensky remains defiant and says Ukraine will not be broken.
Our defence is causing maximum losses to the enemy. There are almost 9,200 killed occupiers as of the morning of the 9th day of the war. We're hitting them near Mykolaiv, near Kharkiv and Kiev. The capital remains the key target for occupiers, but they won't break us.
Journalist Katerina Malofieva was close to the power station after the Russian attack, and she described to us what she saw.
Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is one of the biggest in Europe, and I guess everyone in the world who read this news in the morning were very concerned. I was very close to this nuclear power plant. I was in the town of Marganit, and I saw the power plant today right across 5 kilometers across the river. So, it was quite tense knowing that the power plant is controlled right now by Russian forces. We were escorted by the Ukrainian military who were guarding us. But at the same time, it was very scary because the Ukrainian military told that in the morning there was shelling, and any provocation can be expected from that location, from the power plant that is controlled right now by the Russian forces. So you know that what can happen because Ukrainians cannot shoot back to the power plant for obvious reasons.
As you say, I can imagine it was a very tense situation getting anywhere near that power plant, and you've also been travelling to some of the areas hardest hit by Russian forces. Tell us what you've seen there on the ground.
I still see a lot of cars crossing, heading from Kharkiv to Dnipro via Zaporizhzhia. Also cars from the eastern parts of Ukraine through Zaporizhzhia and Dnipro. People are still trying to be evacuated from the areas where the heavy fighting is ongoing. At the same time, I saw now the videos from Mariupol, but somebody got in touch with me from Mariupol today, managed despite the power shortages and absence of electricity and heating. So the commander of the Azov brigade got in touch with me today telling me that yes, we are encircled, but there are no Russians in the city. So relying on full support by the Ukrainians that the city is still under control of the Ukrainian forces. Unfortunately, scenes that you might see now all over Ukraine are similar. It's all about pain. It's all about scare, fears in their eyes, especially for the children, especially for the elderly. So this situation remains the same at the moment.
Well, on the fire at Ukraine's largest nuclear plant, earlier I spoke to Robert Kelly, a distinguished associate fellow at Stockholm International Peace Research Institute and the former director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and he told me that while there may be a small risk of a serious nuclear accident, the attack on the plant is solely designed to hurt the people of Ukraine.
This plant has a very large boiler inside of it that is fueled with nuclear fuel that produces a lot of heat and produces steam. And in that situation, when you turn it off, you turn it off. After it's been turned off, it remains very hot for days, but it's nowhere near producing the kind of energy that it was when it was at full power. So you're in a situation there where if the cooling pumps continue to work, absolutely nothing will happen. It's not a problem at all. Then you can move into situations like, say, the 3 Mile Island accident 40 years ago in the United States, where there was melting inside the reactor building, inside the core, and nothing got out whatsoever. So I think the worst that we could be looking at in this situation right now is something like 3 Mile Island, where nothing got out of the building. Yes, in Fukushima, it did get out of the building, but that was a really unprecedented accident where they had no emergency power whatsoever. The strategy here is to put the entire country into a cold shutdown position and cause the people there to be in the dark and be cold and be hungry. If you turn off all of the nuclear plants, and there are several others besides the one we're looking at, that's 50% electricity in the country. This is designed to hurt the population very badly. It's to create a siege from within the country. If they can't get electricity from any source, they're going to be cold and hungry and die. And I think that's a terrible humanitarian thing. You may have thought in my first comments there I was not worried about the humanitarian thing. I am. I'm saying the technical part of it's not a problem. But the idea of starving these people to death and freezing them to death is horrible.
Well, NATO says it will not implement a no-fly zone over Ukraine, despite calls from Kiev for stronger assistance. At a foreign ministers' meeting, Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg warned that the worst is yet to come as Russian forces continue their advance. The NATO chief called for President Putin to withdraw his troops and engage in diplomacy, but once again stopped short of offering military support.
On a no-fly zone, it was mentioned at the same time. Allies agree that we should not have NATO planes operating over Ukrainian airspace or NATO troops on Ukrainian territory.
Well, in Brussels for us, our correspondent, Maeve McMahon. Maeve, good to see you. We've been hearing from the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. What did he have to say?
Absolutely. Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, has just had a very long day of talks here in Brussels in the morning at the NATO headquarters, and then he came over here to the Berlaymont, to the headquarters of the Commission, to speak with Ursula von der Leyen, as well as meeting foreign affairs ministers from all around the bloc. And speaking to the press a little bit earlier, he said that everyone was used to these grisly attacks of Russia and that the US and its allies here in Europe were never so unified and so united, whilst he said Russia was never so isolated. He said that the Europeans and the NATO allies and of course the United States have been working step by step over the last couple of weeks and months in order to come up with a diplomatic response to Vladimir Putin. But of course the question in the room, and the question that Ukrainians and locals here in Brussels were calling on NATO when they were protesting outside the headquarters today, was of course, what about a no-fly zone? And I had the opportunity to put a question to Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, and I asked him that very question. If this conflict turns into a massacre, will they be able to implement a no-fly zone? And will NATO and the allies be able to equip Ukrainians with heavy artillery? You can take a listen now to what Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, had to say.
Biden has been clear that we are not going to get into a war with Russia. But we are going to tremendous lengths with allies and partners to provide Ukrainians with the means to effectively defend themselves. And of course, we're seeing every single day their extraordinary heroism, as well as very real results in what they're doing to achieve that.
Well, Maeve, we are on day 9 of this invasion now. We are seeing the unimaginable unfold before our very eyes. The US, the European Union, they're talking about more sanctions. Is there anything else?
Absolutely, and that's exactly what the point of that meeting today was, to discuss those very next steps. And all officials here are telling us at the moment is whatever steps they are, they will be in unison with the United States of America as well. And that's why we saw Antony Blinken join. And of course, Liz Truss as well was also in that room today, showing that the West are working together in unity, imposing sanctions against the regime of Vladimir Putin and all those responsible for the invasion of Ukraine. But what Joseph Borrell, the EU Foreign Affairs chief, said tonight as well in his press conference was this is Putin's war, and it's up to Putin to stop this war. And all the European Union at this stage could do was try and weaken the Russian economy. And Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, speaking earlier alongside Antony Blinken in the building behind me, said that this was having an impact. Slowly but surely, those sanctions were starting to bite, and the Russian economy was starting to fall into freefall. Now, we've seen in the last couple of days the EU introduce a number of sanctions targeting 7 Russian banks, taking them out of SWIFT, also blocking Russia Today and Sputnik in the whole European Union. These are unprecedented measures that the EU never would have contemplated in the past. So what we're hearing tonight is further measures are being considered, taking banks like Gazprom Bank and Sberbank, of course, out of SWIFT as well. But the EU, being the EU, and what Antony Blinken reiterated tonight is diplomacy is, of course, the better option. That's the route they want to take, and they still want to get Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, around the table to talk. But of course, the questions Ukrainians are asking themselves tonight is how many more casualties before diplomacy wins?
That's right, Maeve. How much longer can they wait as well? Maeve McMahon there in Brussels. Good to talk to you, Maeve. Thank you. Well, plenty more coverage to come after the break. Join us then if you can.